Okay. Try to make sure I've got this working right. We'll get started here in 1 second. All right, it seems like I've got it set up right. I'm not talking over myself yet. We will see. All right, any questions before we get started? We've got just a couple of parasites left to wrap up in this chapter. Look at my chat real quick. All right, so I left you guys off. We talked about malaria Monday as we finished the chapter. There's a couple more parasites that we want to think about within the circulatory and lymphatic system. There technically are numerous organisms, but we're not going to go into all of that stuff. Just a couple good ones, I feel like. So the first one we want to focus on this morning is Toxoplasma gondii. This organism is pretty impressive, I feel like. It is something that is very common, I guess I would say. If we were to sample antibody from individuals, it's highly likely that we would recognize previous exposure. We've mounted some sort of an immunological response against these guys. And it's also highly likely that we've never really recognized any sorts of issues or symptoms in the first place. So that sets the stage really for it causing issues or being able to be detected, maybe not necessarily causing issues, in numerous individuals. We'll move through this life cycle here in just 1 second, but ultimately, the bigger concerns, the bigger issues would be with a pregnant woman. That's when we've got problems because the parasite can cross the placenta, infecting that developing child and potentially causing serious issues, maybe fatal outcomes as a result. All right. That's where the big concerns are. Otherwise, maybe not so much of an issue. There are a few other things that we'll think about a little bit as we talk about this that might be other opportunities for issues, but really the biggest problem is with that developing child, right? So Toxoplasma utilizes a cat as the definitive host. So that's where we see the sexual cycle of this parasite occurring. And then as we look at others, ourself included, we serve as intermediaries, harboring a cyst stage of this parasite. And again, potentially issues if we're talking mom up here. So there are numerous things going on, and the life cycle with the cat truly is very simple, right? It doesn't need a whole lot for this parasite to persist in this cycle. And it's the other issues, these other arrows going off here in brown, that set the stage for problems with people, right? Just stuck in this loop right here, all fine and good, if you will. So real quickly, we'll talk about this first loop. We start off with these unsporulated oocysts, so the baby parasites, if you will, within this egg. They're released in the feces of the cat. These oocysts will germinate or sporulate, if you will, and in turn picked up in this simplified life cycle by some intermediary host. Birds and rodents are the main players when we think about this cycle with the cat. So after this happens, an ingestion with these the oocysts, so feeding on whatever it might be, and there are numerous opportunities. As we think about this, you might say, well, geez, my cat goes outside, digs a hole, and goes to the bathroom and buries it. He's good. It's all, seems fine. There are still issues with that. And it's been documented that things like earthworms can feed through that, ingesting it, and ultimately depositing these oocysts back onto the surface of the soil, lending to contamination and the opportunity for these animals to ingest these oocysts. So just because you think your cat's better than your dog because your cat does its business and buries it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a better situation. All right. So, and I'm not trying to make you not like cats because deep down, although it's not Toxoplasma gondii, there are other parasites. Basically, any sort of pet that you have could open up an opportunity to give you a parasite. So don't just think cats are bad news. So enough of that. The oocyst gets into these animals through ingestion, and then within the musculature, we see these guys forming cysts. So they transform, and I'll show you an image of some of these developmental stages here in the next slide. But the oocysts, basically, they hatch out and transform into these tachyozoites. This is a feeding stage of this parasite. The tachyozoites get into tissues, musculature, or nervous tissue, maybe both. And then they develop into some cyst stages. The cyst stage is what would be infective to the cat, all right? And as it eats the rodent or the bird, it ingests the cyst. And as it gets into the intestines, it ultimately starts the parasitic infection. Infection in the cat is super simple. The parasite gets in, replicates within the intestine. You don't really see any sorts of ill effects. You don't recognize your cat is sick with this parasite, and the intestinal cells are shed and replaced very rapidly. So you don't see, kitty having bouts of diarrhea or anything like that. There's no symptoms, all right? So that also may set the stage for potential concern because you don't know kitty is sick. So there's other opportunities that set the stage to bringing it to us, all right? And these oocysts have the opportunity maybe for other animals that might be on our diet to be consumed. Not that the chicken over here couldn't be on your menu as well, all right? But these intermediary hosts, we think about similar idea where they ingest this. Then within the musculature of these animals, the cysts are formed, and now we think about poorly cooked stuff. And likely it might be more with cattle, a medium rare or rare steak might be something that you think is delicious. A rare pork chop just sounds disgusting, all right? So I'm pretty sure if you're eating pork, it's going to be cooked more thoroughly than the possibility with some of the beef. So it also kind of depends, all right? Maybe rare pork chops are delicious, all right? I think it's gross. That's just my own personal opinion, all right? I also thought that I would never enjoy sushi till I tasted it. And then I was like, holy cow, this is delicious. but that doesn't mean I'm going to start eating raw pork chops. All right, so we consume this meat poorly cooked or undercooked, maybe raw, and it sets the stage for those cysts to become ingested by us, and we can get infected that way. So these eyes are infectious routes. So eating poorly cooked tissues that were infected sets the stage. And we have also recognized issues through blood transfusions, where in this case, it would be tachyozoites in the circulation that are within the transfused blood, and that's what causes infection. So there are opportunities for that as well. And recognizing this, there are screenings that occur to ensure that this is not something that's happening. All right, but we recognize it because before we weren't screening for these tachyozoites. Obviously, infection was transmitted to a few individuals. So the bigger issues are really this other arrow right here coming down on the bottom. So we oftentimes, thinking about meat stuff, probably not so likely, all right? Maybe, but not as huge of a concern. It's more likely having a cat and a litter box that sets the stage for you becoming infected, much more so than eating, a steak that's possibly got some of these within it. All right, pretty unlikely, at least in the United States, I would guess. All right, so changing litter boxes. Almost every brand of cat litter has warning labels on the bag telling women of childbearing age to use caution. If you know you are pregnant, you should use extreme caution when you are changing a litter box. Deep down, I feel like maybe you ought to have somebody else do that, right? So just kind of depends. Maybe you're the only one, all right? You need to be careful and make sure that you wash your hands when you're done changing the litter box. You also want to try to not get a bunch of dust. You don't want to aerosolize the litter to in turn potentially inhale some of that. That can be infectious. We see here other stuff, fruits and vegetables and water might be contaminated with the oocysts. There are possibilities with that. Poor hygiene, not washing your hands after you've changed the litter box sets the stage for that as well. So then that has the potential to infect us, right? And as we move up this route, like I said, this is more of the concern. If you are pregnant, the possibility for those parasites to cross the placenta is huge, all right? And the issues with this, I mentioned many of us, especially when you hit adulthood, many of us, if we were to take a blood sample, we would detect antibody, right? That does not mean any sorts of issues, not necessarily, any sorts of issues for that developing child. It's truly if you are infected with the parasite as you are pregnant, all right? That's the issue, all right? Seeing a little bit of antibody response. You may have a few of these cysts within your body, within your musculature, but the tachyozoites, you don't typically think of these guys persisting for tremendous amounts of time. There are some different pictures with some of the stages of this and keeping you sort of immune. Not going in to super detail with that stuff because we don't need to worry about it, all right? But it's contracting this infection as you are pregnant that lends to the organism infecting that developing child. That's the issue, all right? Because deep down, at least in the United States, levels of this are really pretty low, all right? With children being born with toxoplasmosis, few thousand children are born, all right? There are countless children born in the United States every single year, right? Millions of children are born, but only a few thousand that are infected with this. Of those millions of children that are born, I would assume that lots of these people probably have cats or have been in contact with cats at some point in your life. So if it were just the case of having contact, you would expect the number of children born to be considerably greater with this infection, and that's not the case. So it has to be during pregnancy, and especially the first trimester of pregnancy sets bigger issues because of the tremendous amount of development and cell division that's happening at that point. It sets the stage for serious complications, right? So numerous opportunities with this, and it's these cyst stages that are ultimately what's being transmitted or ingested by the cat, but transmitted to us or forming within our own tissues, right? So here's, I told you there'd be a couple of images. These are the tachyozoites, so the active trophozoite stage of this parasite when it's getting into us, coming out of that cyst stage. And then after it gets in, it's going to form some cysts. This is what we're looking at right here. This is out of a mouse, but it'd be similar if we were looking at our own. It forms these cysts, and within this, we've got and we'd call this a bradiozoite is the cyst, and it's full of these cells inside, replicated asexually. And in this case, there are, we're looking at brain tissue in the second image. If we're up in the nervous tissue, if we're in the brain, we start off with this cyst, this bradiozoite, and then we start trying to mount a response and try to kind of calcify it, wall it off a little bit further with our own immune response. And we transition and now start calling this a zoidocyst. And the potential for that to rupture later on, releasing parasites, does set the stage for concern, but typically it sequesters them away, right? And the same within your muscle tissue, it doesn't calcify them, but this bradiozoite, the cyst, harbors these parasites, and that would be what's infective to the cat. So in a mouse, that's what it consumes, and ultimately within the gut, you get the tachyozoites, and they're replicating. All right. So in us, these quickly convert into these cysts to complete that. Okay, enough of our toxoplasma. It is definitely an interesting one and something that is really pretty common. Like I said, almost every bag of kitty litter says to use caution. So as we shift over the littlest bit, Babesia, there are a handful of different types of Babesia species. Babesia microti is a good one for people. There's some other ones that we think about with some livestock. Infection with this causes babesiosis, and the parasite, Babesia parasite, as we see here in these red cells, is transmitted to us through the bite of a tick. So this is a tick-borne parasite, protozoal parasite, that causes issues as it gets in. And this is something that is more like lots of the infectious disease that we kind of think about, more of a concern when we think about compromised status of the host, like HIV. Shifting a little bit, still protozoal parasites. This one is a trypanosome. These are what we call a hemoflagellate, because these little flagellated parasites, this guy right here, survive outside of cells within our circulation. Hemoflagellate, so little flagella guy in the blood. All right, that's the idea. So These, first off, I think really, I don't want to see this in my own blood smear, but seeing some of these images, I'm like, man, those sure look cool. Again, not if it was my smear, but it is interesting to see that, and it's something you typically are not expecting to see in a blood smear. So, it might lend to a little bit of excitement in the lab, all right? Or maybe you're maybe disturbed, right? So these guys, there are a handful of different types of trypanosomes, and there are some that we think about, like African sleeping sickness, Trypanosoma brucei. These guys are transmitted by a different arthropod vector, and they're transmitted in the saliva. This guy, Trypanosoma cruzi, is transmitted by a triatomine bug. We call them kissing bugs. And this right here, or an assassin bug, really kind of upsets me because they're not assassin bugs, all right? There is an assassin bug, and it looks almost exactly like these guys. They are close cousins, all right? But the issue with this, the kissing bug or the little triatomine bug, we also call him a cone nose beetle because of his little mouth parts, all right? This cone nose beetle that's transmitting Chagas disease, their bite is painless. You don't know that these guys bit you, all right? The assassin bug is different. And if it bites you, you know it. You feel it. It is super painful and different, all right? Assassin bugs, well, they're assassins. They're predators for other sorts of arthropods, all right? And these triatomine bugs, they're not doing that stuff, right? So it is a little bit different. They do look very similar, all right? So whatever, it's not the same. So Chagas disease is the infection with these guys. And I mentioned some other trypanosomes by the saliva. These guys, the infection happens through the feces. So yes, that bug is feeding on you. It's taking a blood meal, but it's the feces from the bug that harbors the parasite. It infects or inoculates the wound or the mucous membranes, and that in turn sets the stage for disease, right? So kind of interesting, kind of cool, and most likely very disturbing. The kissing bug is named the kissing bug because of its practice. This bug is nocturnal, so you don't typically see these guys in your house in the day, all right? They're hiding away, they're sleeping, all right? But at night, they are active. And these little guys are attracted to carbon dioxide. They like it, they sense it, they sniff it out, and they want to move toward it. That means as you are sleeping, your face is right where they want to go, hence the name kissing bug, all right? So they crawl up onto your face, they take a blood meal by your mouth usually, all right? And like I said, you don't know it. As they feed on you, the bite is painless, all right? So in the process of doing this, they defecate. If that feces makes its way into the wound, it inoculates it. You see a bump that we call a chagoma, and that's your first sign that something's happened, all right? If in the process of feeding, the feces makes its way into your eye, you brush it into your eye, or the bug itself defecates and it gets into your eye swells shut. We call it a sign of Romagna. It looks like you've got pink eye, but it's different. Pink eye typically, it's a little bit of inflammation and your eyes all kind of glued shut. This is very swollen, almost like a black eye sort of an issue that results. And it's a massive reaction of this parasite. Mucous membranes, so mouth, eye, anything like that sets the stage for this parasite to get in, all right? These guys are found in the United States. They're found elsewhere. But in the United States, in the southern states, New Mexico and Arizona are locations where they have been found. There's also thoughts, with climate change that they are moving. And there is evidence that potentially southern Utah is exhibiting some of these bugs. The assassin bug, I'm not 100% with this. I'm not an entomologist, but I like some of these as far as transmitting parasites. The assassin bug, again, a close cousin. I am not 100% as far as is it commonly found in Southeast Idaho, but it definitely has been recognized. There have been cases of people with bites from the assassin bugs. And like I said, it's painful, right? So to me, that begs the question, if they are marching north, the potential for these bugs, the triatomine bug, to be following is there, all right? So could we maybe worry about this? I think it should maybe be on the radar. They do like, areas where they've got greater likelihood of being able to hide. So in some of, early accounts of this, it was first recognized in the early 1900s, again, kind of southern states or Mexico. Also, they've recognized some of like the adobe or thatched roofs, adobe huts, thatched roofs, both setting the stage for kind of good areas for these little guys to hide. So there's issues for sure, right? So they get into us infecting within our circulation, causing infection. And there are numerous things. I don't remember if I have another slide about it. I don't. Numerous issues that can result with infection. And it's pretty impressive. You may be asymptomatic and not recognize any ill effects for quite some time. And then we can also see the parasite causing issues, destruction of nerve ganglia in the esophagus or in the colon, or potentially both, leading to issues with digestion. So you can't swallow your food properly. Peristalsis is ultimately impacted considerably. And so you can't swallow, or with the issues with the colon, you can't ultimately pass any of the feces out. There's also issues with heart problems that may result as well. And again, you may not recognize this until later. Infection in adults, typically relatively mild to asymptomatic situations, not a huge concern, all right? There are, as I said, some of these potentials for it to progress and cause serious consequences. However, in little kids under 5 or so, infection with this is super serious and potentially fatal. So you definitely have concern about that, or you ought to, all right? Crazy little kissing bug. Sounds so harmless, so benign, but not. Leishmania, these guys are related to the trypanosomes. They're a little bit different, but they do have genetically some similarity with them. They're also, just like the trypanosomes, where you've got a handful of different types of those parasites, there are numerous types of Leishmania parasites. And the infections can be skin deep, as we see I don't know if that's an arm or a leg, as we see an appendage from this person, or it could be visceral. So you've got serious, massive organ involvement, and those infections are definitely more of a concern, all right? So numerous types, some potentially capable of popping up here, not necessarily in Idaho, but Leishmania mexicana, in North America, definitely in Mexico, but southern states as well. Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, all potentials for this. And again, cutaneous form. So within our circulation, the Leishmania parasites, as they get inoculated in by a sandfly, these guys will take up residence in our white blood cells, in our macrophages. And as far as a parasite goes, if you want to avoid being destroyed, maybe the best place to live is right in the cell that's going to destroy you in the first place. They get in there and they basically cause the lysosomes to not dump their digestive enzymes, or if they do, they've got mechanisms that basically make them impervious to the action of those digestive enzymes, and they live right inside of the vacuoles that should be destroying them, and they replicate, proliferate, causing the macrophage to explode, releasing more amastigotes to turn around and infect more macrophages. It's a brilliant mechanism to kind of stick around within us. Then that fly takes a blood meal, and with that opportunity, some of those amastigotes free floating in the circulation, if they pick those guys up, they're capable of infecting others. And it doesn't matter if we're talking the cutaneous or visceral form, the way that it's transmitted is very similar with that. It's just the manifestations of the disease that sets it apart a little bit. So we hit virtually all of these. The one we didn't talk about was a worm, the schistosomiasis. The text does mention it a little bit. If I remember right, I don't think there was an image with it. Let me check real quick just to see. I'll clear back to chapter 5 is when they mentioned some of that with the life cycle. So that's fine. We don't need to open that up. So schistosomiasis, the one we haven't talked about, and I will mention, we'll flip back to the table here in a second, but cercarial dermatitis, this is commonly called swimmer's itch, and it is something that I've never heard it called clam digger's itch. I like that. It makes sense. Swimmer's itch is something that is common around here. You definitely in the summer months hear about this. You should hear about it maybe. And it is like different lakes, Jensen's Grove, Rigby Lake, have both, to my knowledge, repeatedly been plagued with this parasite. And let me go back to the table and we'll talk about it in a little more detail. And the issue with that, we'll start at the bottom since I'm already on that. The issue with that is there's a handful of schistosoma parasites that want to infect people, if they want anything, I guess, that would infect people, right? And it causes various sorts of illness for the true human infection. These guys are transmitted to us. They infect a snail. The eggs are voided out in urine or feces. If it makes its way into the water, it's the perfect situation. The eggs get into the snail. There's multiple developments in the snail. The parasite's released out of the snail, and these little juvenile stages, we call them cercaria, will penetrate into our skin and make their way through our circulation, either to the bile ducts or into the veins, go into the bladder plexus. So either intestines or urine, the bladder, are where eggs would be deposited and voided out, either feces or urine, respectively. Again, to the water, to the snail, back to us. All right. That's how schistosoma in a human form wants for that life cycle to be completed. There are numerous other schistosoma species, all right? And those that I just described infecting humans, you don't see those in the United States, all right? We don't worry about issues like that. You can get infected, but we know you've traveled abroad. Likely to areas in Africa are ripe with these types of parasites, all right? The other ones that we can potentially see around here, these are more common to infect like birds as their intermediary host, or really, I guess, definitive host in this case. As they get into these birds, the cycle is completed, just like I was describing in us. But if we happen to be in the water and these parasites, these little cercaria, penetrate into our skin, well, as it turns out, our innate defenses set the stage for this parasite to not develop as it truly could or truly wants to. It can't migrate through the tissues, and it stays localized. You get this dermatitis, little welts almost, where the parasite is localized under the skin. You've got an inflammatory response, basically macrophages showing up and destroying these parasites for almost exactly where they penetrated into the skin, right? And it is relatively common around here with different types of lakes where those specific snails happen to be present, right? And you know, the text, as I was just looking at that, the clam digger's itch makes sense too, because if you were out at the coast and you were digging up clams, likely you would be in the water a little bit, and your ankles would be potentially exposed, allowing the parasites to penetrate in, right? So interesting stuff. All right. The real deal with this, those that infect us, we see issues with rash and fever, inflammation. There's the potential for, you know, depending on the specifics, scarring of the liver or issues in the bladder. And a lot of the time with these guys, it's the eggs that are being released from the parasite that set the stage for damage. They've got little spikes or spines on them that cause problems. So those being released into the bladder, those eggs cause damage to the tissues, setting the stage for a proliferation of cells, and the potential for bladder cancer is there with that type of schistosome. So there are some serious issues with this. So again, eggs in the urine or stool. And these guys, the schistosomes, they are a type of, you know, we've got them in here as the helmets. They're a type of worm that they are a trematode, so a flatworm. And almost all of the flatworms are hermaphrodites, except for the schistosomes. These guys are one of the only trematodes that have separate sexes. We call them dioecious, and they pair up, the male and female, pair up in the circulation and then migrate to, like I said, the liver or the bladder, and then they start pumping out eggs, and they stay paired up for life. So that's impressive in and of itself. I guess we'll move backwards since we started at the bottom. We'll go up this way. Toxoplasmosis, where we started lecture this morning, Toxoplasma gondii, and it's tissue cysts that we can potentially see in us, pregnant women, defects in that fetus, or possible miscarriage. And some of the consequences, if that child is born, are super severe, very debilitating, definite issues that are lifelong, right? So concerns, right? And I feel like we went into pretty big detail with that. Last time we talked malaria, Plasmodium. There's a handful of different species, Vivax malariae, Falciparum ovale, and Knowlesii. Falciparum is a very dangerous type of malaria, with over 50% of the malaria infections being this type. And falciparum malaria will target any aged red blood cell. So the potential for serious or fatal consequences with this guy is tremendous. Alternately, malariae is a parasite that will infect only old red blood cells, all right? Those that are almost ready to be removed out of circulation. So the likelihood of finding massive amounts of Plasmodium malariae, very, very poor, all right? Falciparum, a single little blood smear, you're going to see countless cells infected, all right? But with malaria, you might spend a half an hour looking at these red cells before you finally find one with the parasite in it, all right? And as that hopefully makes sense, the types of symptoms exhibited are tremendously varied with this. A parasite infecting almost every red blood cell you've got, you expect your symptoms are going to be severe. One that targets only handfuls of cells, very mild, all right? So you still, regardless, see bouts of fevers and chills, all sorts of issues with this. There are, descriptions of the fever chill cycles where you get the shivers, you get the chills so bad, your teeth are chattering, and it seems like you just can't stop. And it has been shown repeatedly that people have the chills so bad that they shatter their teeth. That's impressive, all right? You truly can't wrap your head around the severity of malaria until you hear some of these horrifying descriptions that really makes you say, wait a minute. And this is something we think of as a childhood illness. That's crazy stuff, right? So there's other issues with some of these guys as well, like malaria. Keeping a few of these within your system might provide a little bit of protection, which seems like that's kind of counterintuitive. We're not going on to details about that either. We could talk about parasites all day long, but we won't, all right? So issues, and there's issues with the type of species. Knowlesii down here at the bottom is one that commonly infects primates other than us. And so it's kind of interesting showing the jumping species sort of situation with this. And another one that's a whole other tangent that I won't go off on. Leishmaniasis, there's again handfuls of Leishmaniasis species. Skin, we see ulcers involving maybe months or a year or better before that thing heals up. And that's definitely an issue as well. So organ involvement is possibility again with those visceral forms where we see severe swelling of the liver and the spleen and possibility of those organs to rupture. The spleen, not the liver necessarily, but the spleen for sure, possibly rupturing with the massive swelling, and that could be ultimately the end. Some of the first Leishmania parasites were observed in individual soldiers, British soldiers in India that had basically bled out through ruptured spleen. And as they went in and did an autopsy and collected some of the tissues and looked at it under the microscope, they saw all of these amastigotes within these cells. Pretty impressive. And they're like, what the heck is this stuff, right? And Sir William Leishman, or Leishman, however you pronounce him, was one of those that discovered it in the first place, before he was knighted, before he was Sir William. So that's a whole other tidbit. Chagas disease, Trypanosoma cruzi, again, the cone-nose beetle or kissing bug transmitting this, and there's issues, especially if you're a little kid. And then babesia, babesiosis transmitted by a tick. and some of these, common sorts of issues. All right. Stop sharing there. Any questions or comments, concerns? We were going to stop just a couple minutes early. Seeing nothing on my chat. All right, guys. Farewell. Have a good day. I will start the last chapter Friday. I am so close getting the final put together. I will have a study guide posted for you guys very soon. I don't want to post a study guide till I've got the final so that I can actually tailor it to that. So patience, it will be up very, very soon. All right. Anything? Okay. Farewell. Have a good day.